My sister abruptly returns to the country on the day of my wedding. My parents, brother, and fiancé abandoned me to pick her up at the airport. She shares a photo of them on her social media, bragging about how she's so loved. Meanwhile, all the calls I make are rejected. My fiancé is the only one who answers, but all he tells me is not to kick up a fuss. We can always have our wedding some other day. They turn me into a laughingstock on the day I've looked forward to all my life. Everyone points at me and laughs in my face. I calmly deal with everything before writing a new number in my journal. 99. This is their 99th time disappointing me. I won't wish for them to love me anymore. I fill in a request to study abroad and pack my luggage. They think I've learned to be obedient, but I'm actually about to leave forever. The door to my room was suddenly pushed open. Without warning, my brother, Adrian Hoffman, walked in and scoffed when he saw me staring blankly at my diary. Aren't you a little too old to be writing a diary? Normally, I would have argued back, but this time I didn't even lift my head or respond. Seeing my lack of reaction, he grew irritated and ran his hand through his hair before snatching my diary to take a look on. It was a single 99. It was the number of times they had let me down over the years. Adrian frowned, unable to make sense of it. He tossed my diary onto the floor and stopped writing this nonsense. Nina wants to eat the garlic shrimp you make. Go wash your hands and get downstairs. Consider an apology for that snarky remark you made to her earlier. I only hummed in response before I got up and headed downstairs. Adrian was surprised that I didn't throw a tantrum. After all, every time my family asked me to make garlic shrimp, I would always cry and whine as if it were some huge injustice. He must be wondering why I was so quiet this time. Sadie, did you switch personalities or something? Or are you planning something sneaky like putting something in the food? Adrian eyed me suspiciously, trying to see through me. He finally noticed my slightly red-rimmed eyes and stiffened, shutting his mouth. After a long while, he spoke again. Nina was abroad for a year. She's been on her own for so long, and this is her first time back. We were eager to see her. You should be moving. It was just a wedding. We can just push it to a later date, can't we? I remained silent as I took the shrimp out of the fridge and began to clean them, right. It was just a wedding in their eyes. Nothing was more important than welcoming my sister, Nina Hoffman, back home. Not even the wedding I had been looking forward to for so long. It had taken me a lot of convincing to secure a high-end designer wedding gown. I had also spent more than 6 months meticulously planning the decorations with my wedding planner. They had seen all of my efforts, and yet the people closest to me had turned me into a complete joke. My entire family had been absent at my wedding, and even the groom, Brandon Keller, had never shown up. While Nina was flaunting on social media about how many people had come to welcome her home, I had faced the guests' ridicule and dealt with the aftermath alone. Even the hotel staff had felt sorry for me when they had seen how pale I looked. They had urged me to return home to rest, but the first thing my family had done when they got home was make me their cook. I smiled wryly, thinking of my aging parents. I had originally planned to turn down my professor's offer to study abroad, especially since Nina had also been abroad. Adrian was busy with work, and I had plans to get married. But now I knew leaving was the only right decision. Unfortunately, even though I had submitted my application, I still had to wait 2 more weeks before I could leave. I pushed Adrian away. Move, please. You're in the way. He appeared a little lost and was about to say something when the beloved princess in the living room called out to him. Adrian, I can't seem to shell this pecan. That made Adrian all worked up. Don't do it yourself. You're going to hurt your hands. You're a future pianist. Hold on, I'll do it for you. With that, the annoying fly finally left the kitchen. I looked down at my hands. My slender fingers were now red and swollen from an allergic reaction. As I placed the cooked shrimp on the dining table, I glanced toward the living room. The atmosphere there was warm and joyful. My father, Zachary Hoffman, who was usually so busy with work, suddenly didn't seem busy at all. He sat there patiently listening to his youngest daughter as she recounted her exciting experiences abroad. My mother, Nancy Payton, held Nina in her arms, her eyes with affection, as she fussed over how much weight the latter had lost and how hard it must have been for her abroad. Adrian sat beside them, fully focused on shelling pecans for Nina. I didn't say a word. I just watched the heartwarming scene quietly. The living room and dining area felt like 2 separate worlds. One was filled with warmth and laughter, and the other with emptiness. Sadie, why are you standing over there instead of joining us? Is it because you're still mad at me for ruining your wedding? Nina suddenly said pitifully. It was only then that the people in the living room noticed me. Dad frowned instinctively. Why that long face? Get over here. Mom looked annoyed as well. Your wedding was ruined because you picked a bad date. This has nothing to do with N. Don't you dare get mad at her or I'll no longer be your mom. Nina pouted and clung to Mom. Mom, don't say that. You'll make Sadie sad. Though she sounded like she was defending me, the triumphant look in her eyes was undeniable. Nina was far from innocent. I had already told her when my wedding would be a week before she had seen my message, and even told me she had a surprise prepared for me. What a surprise indeed. This was a game she had been playing since we were kids every time. My parents and Adrian never chose me. Not even my fiancé, who was supposed to spend his life with me, ever chose me. I should have been heartbroken, but I must have gotten used to it because I felt nothing when I heard those words. Now I'm not mad. My words made everyone turn to me in stupor. They must have thought it was impossible. I took in their expressions, feeling the irony. See, even they knew what they had done was enough to make someone angry. But they had done it anyway. They even had the nerve to blame me for how I was feeling. Mom, Dad, and Adrian seemed to sense something was off with how calm I was. After a brief silence, Dad finally said, "It's good to know you're not mad. We're family. We shouldn't hold grudges over things like this." I know. I nodded obediently. Seeing that I really didn't seem to mind, they relaxed and led Nina to the dining area. Aside from the garlic shrimp I made, the table was filled with all kinds of seafood. They were all Nina's favorites. "Nina, you've lost so much weight. Eat up, Mom." Dee and Adrian barely stopped serving Nina food. Soon her plate had turned into a small mountain. She beamed as she continued boasting about her studies abroad, talking about how she had already secured a spot in an orchestra and would soon be performing. Mom, Dad, and Adrian showered her with praise while I ate in silence. Noticing how unusually quiet I was, Mom seemed to feel a little guilty, and finally thought about the grievance I had suffered. A shrimp landed on my plate. I looked up and saw Mom shift awkwardly. "Eat up. Don't think we're always favoring Nina. I got you some too." I stared at the shrimp for a long time before putting down my utensils. "It's all right. I'm already full." Feeling embarrassed, Mom was irritated. "What's with you?" She wanted to say more, but Nina suddenly clutched her throat, her expression changing. "Mom, I can't breathe." Mom, Dad, and Adrian immediately rushed to Nina's side. When they saw the rash on her skin, they panicked. "Are you having an allergic reaction? Why would you suddenly be having an allergic reaction?" Mom looked around until finally her gaze locked onto me. The next second, she slapped me so hard that I lost my balance and fell to the ground. My head buzzed from the impact. "Sadie, what did you put in the food? Don't you remember what your sister is allergic to?" Adrian looked disappointed too. "I was wondering why you were so agreeable. It turns out you were plotting to harm Nina after all. How did I end up with such a hateful sister like you? That's enough. Stop arguing. We need to take Nina to the hospital right now." Dad slammed the table in anger, and only then did Mom and Adrian retract their hateful stares from me. My entire family left in a rush, leaving me sitting on the floor in a daze as I clutched my swollen cheek. I didn't do it. I wanted to tell them that it wasn't me, but similar events had happened too many times before, and I knew very well that they wouldn't believe me. Well, it didn't matter. Our housekeeper had heard the commotion and came over to help me up, but when she saw my hands, she gasped in shock. "Sadie, why is your hand so swollen? I'm fine." I turned down her kindness, getting up on my own before returning to my room. As I picked up the diary on my desk, countless memories came flooding back. When I was 8 years old, we weren't doing very well. The 5 of us were squeezed into an old rundown house. My parents struggled to balance their busy jobs with raising 3 children. Eventually, they decided to send one of us to live with our grandparents in the countryside. However, Adrian was about to start high school, which was a critical time for his studies. While Nina was still too young and in poor health, they were too worried to send her away. Not wanting my parents to worry, I volunteered bravely, and so I was sent to the countryside. Before I left, Mom stroked my head, praising me for being the most thoughtful child. It was the day I had dreamed of for as long as I could remember, a day meant to herald the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I had spent endless nights imagining the perfect wedding, painstakingly choosing a high-end designer gown, and envisioning a celebration that would forever be etched in the memories of everyone I loved. Yet, as I stood in the cold, empty corridor of the hotel where I was meant to be the center of joy and adoration, I realized with a bitter clarity that my dream was crumbling in real time. My sister Nina had returned abruptly to the country on the very day of my wedding. The irony was almost too cruel to bear. While I had agonized over every detail, my family, my parents, my brother Adrian, and even my fiancé Brandon, had abandoned me to welcome her at the airport. Nina's triumphant social media post, brimming with hashtags and boastful smiles as she celebrated her beloved return, cut me to the core. Every time I dialed a number, every call I made was met with rejection, except for one, the call from Brandon. His voice was detached, coldly pragmatic. "Don't kick up a fuss. We can always have our wedding some other day." That promise, so carelessly given, echoed through the empty halls of my heart. I was left a laughingstock, a living reminder of how even the day I had yearned for most could be reduced to humiliation. The guests jeered and pointed, and the snickers that followed me like a dark cloud were impossible to ignore. Yet, I stood there calmly, as if I had resigned myself to fate's cruel twists, while my mind turned over the events with a steady, measured resolve. In my journal, I added another entry marked with the number 99. This was the 99th time my family had disappointed me, the 99th time I had been left alone in the midst of their callous priorities. That number, 99, had become my silent epitaph, a record of each instance where I felt unwanted, unloved, and unseen by those who claimed to care. I'd written in that diary since I was a child, each entry a secret testament to the pain I endured and the resilience I forged in silence. Every tear, every moment of neglect was etched on those pages. And now, as I stared at the fresh smear of ink on the diary's yellowed paper, I realized that I had long ceased wishing for my family to love me. I had accepted their shortcomings as a fact of my existence. When the door to my room was suddenly shoved open, I felt a momentary surge of numbness. My brother, Adrian, swept into the room with his customary arrogance. "Aren't you a little too old to be scribbling in that diary?" he sneered. Ordinarily, I might have fired back with a biting remark, but today, the heartbreak was so deep that even my defiance had evaporated into silence. Adrian's eyes scanned the diary, lingering on the single stark 99 I had scrawled, as if trying to decipher a mystery that had haunted our lives for far too long. With a dismissive toss, he flung it onto the floor and barked, "Stop writing this nonsense. Nina wants garlic shrimp. Go wash your hands and get downstairs." His words, so trivial against the backdrop of my shattered wedding, stung like a fresh wound. But I managed only a quiet hum of acknowledgement. I rose mechanically, my movements betraying nothing of the storm raging within me, and headed downstairs. For Adrian, it was a trivial day, a wedding postponed, a minor inconvenience. For me, it was a day that sealed my isolation. The living room was a study in duality. On one side, my family exuded warmth and care as they showered Nina with praise and attention. My mother, Nancy, held Nina close, her eyes gleaming with unfiltered affection as she chided my sister for forgetting how much weight she'd lost during her time abroad. My father, Zachary, had abandoned his usual business-like urgency to become an attentive listener, nodding enthusiastically at every word Nina uttered about her adventures. Even Adrian, who usually carried himself with a mixture of indifference and resentment, was busy in the kitchen, shelling pecans with a precision that bordered on obsessive. I moved through the scene like a ghost in a familiar haunted house. Every glance, every laugh directed at Nina reminded me that I had never truly belonged to this family. I prepared garlic shrimp, the dish I was forced to make time and time again, the dish that had come to symbolize my endless sacrifices. Each pried shell and every delicate flick of my wrist felt like a plea for recognition. And yet, in the cacophony of familial celebration, I remained a silent observer, the invisible one. "Nina, you've lost so much weight," my mother cooed, sliding another mound of seafood onto my sister's plate. Nina beamed at the compliment, her smile widening as she regaled everyone with tales of her studies abroad and her burgeoning musical career. My stomach churned with a mix of jealousy and resignation. It was as if every word she spoke was a reminder that my life, my wedding, my dreams, were all being sidelined in favor of her triumphant return. In that moment, as my family congregated around Nina like a flock of devoted birds, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would no longer be the sacrificial lamb, the one who gave everything, only to be left with scraps of affection. My heart, though battered and bruised, began to stir with the first flickers of rebellion. I would take the only choice I had left, to leave. After the incident in the living room, where my family's well-meaning attempts at reconciliation felt like a cruel joke, I retreated to my room. I gathered my thoughts and took out my diary once more. I remembered the countless nights I had spent pouring my sorrows onto those pages, and in that moment I realized that the diary was more than a repository of pain. It was also the blueprint for my escape. I had already submitted an application to study abroad, a decision born out of the realization that I needed to break free from the shackles of a family that had never truly chosen me. 2 weeks remained until my departure, and every minute of that time was now charged with a sense of finality. I packed slowly, each piece of clothing and every cherished memento a silent farewell to a life defined by neglect. But fate, it seemed, had one more twist in store. Just as I finished tidying up my room and securing my few possessions, the door swung open once again. This time, it wasn't Adrian who burst in, but a presence more startling. A presence that would change everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. I heard footsteps, tentative yet insistent, approaching my door. I didn't have the strength to turn around, but I could sense the person's weight, their hesitation. And then, a voice I hadn't expected to hear in so long whispered softly, "Sadie." The voice was laden with sorrow, regret, and a secret I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. I recognized that voice from the fragments of memories. Late-night conversations in a long-forgotten room, whispered confessions when I was barely a child. It was the voice of a sister I thought had vanished into the mists of time, a sister whose presence had always been shrouded in mystery and unspoken tension. But it wasn't Nina. It wasn't the triumphant, self-assured Nina. It was another sister, the one who had been sent away when the world became too heavy for our parents to bear. I had always known there was another piece of our fractured family history, but I had never truly believed it would resurface now, on the eve of my departure. The door creaked as it opened wider, and there she stood, a figure draped in the twilight of the past, eyes glistening with unshed tears, a quiet determination etched on her face. "Sadie, I'm back," she whispered. "I'm so sorry it took me this long." I felt my heart shatter all over again. Yet within that collapse, there was a strange sense of recognition. For years, I had believed I was alone in my pain. Now here was someone who had shared my burdens in silence. A forgotten sibling whose return was as unexpected as it was seismic. Her arrival would set in motion events that I could never have predicted, unraveling secrets of our childhood, our parents' choices, and the dark undercurrents that had long governed our family's dynamics. As I stood there, dazed by the collision of past and present, I couldn't help but wonder, could this mysterious return be the catalyst for the final, irrevocable change in my life? In the aftermath of that fateful day, the house was never the same. With Nina's boisterous presence having already redefined the family's narrative, the unexpected return of my long-lost sister, whom I now knew as Eliza, threw everything into disarray. The air felt heavy with secrets, each corner of our childhood home echoing with memories both tender and terrible. I found myself retreating into solitude as the family gathered around the table to tend to Nina's sudden allergic reaction. I tried to explain that I hadn't tampered with the garlic shrimp, but the words died on my tongue. The angry accusations and harsh slaps had done their irreversible work. I was already branded as the scapegoat. In that moment, I resolved that I would never again allow myself to be caught in the crossfire of familial neglect and favoritism. For days, I wandered the empty hallways of our old home, each room a relic of a past I had long tried to forget. I revisited memories of my childhood, the cramped apartment we all once shared, the long nights filled with whispered conversations and tears, the moments of fleeting joy amidst hardship. I remembered volunteering to go live with our grandparents in the countryside, a decision made out of love for my parents and fear of burdening them further. Now, every step I took was weighted by the pain of unreciprocated love and the sting of being overlooked time and again. I began to compile the pages of my diary, a chronicle of 99 disappointments that had, over the years, become my silent testament to survival. But now, as I reread the faded ink and scribbled margins, I realized that there was more to those numbers than mere tally marks of grief. They were a ledger of every time I had been abandoned, every moment I had felt unwanted. And in the midst of that ledger, a question had always lingered. Why was I always the one left behind? One rainy afternoon, as the patter of droplets on the window mingled with the distant rumble of thunder, I sat at my small desk and began to write once more. This time, however, I wrote with a resolve that was both defiant and fragile, a promise to myself that I would break free from the chains of familial neglect and claim the life that was rightfully mine. I wrote about the wedding that had been ruined by petty selfishness, about the painful irony of being forced to celebrate the return of a sister while my own happiness was sacrificed. I wrote until the pages were filled with raw emotion, each word a step toward reclaiming my identity. As I wrote, I couldn't help but feel that the universe was urging me forward. The study abroad application, already submitted with trembling hands, now seemed less like an escape and more like a rebirth. I would leave this place behind, not as a victim of my family's neglect, but as a woman determined to forge a future defined by her own choices. My plans to depart in 2 weeks took on a bittersweet urgency. I was leaving behind a past that had scarred me, yet I couldn't shake the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The days leading up to my departure were a whirlwind of hushed goodbyes and quiet preparations. I continued with my daily rituals, preparing meals, tidying the house, but now each action was accompanied by a silent countdown. I was no longer the obedient daughter. I was an exile in my own home, a reluctant participant in a farce that had become my life. Adrian, who had always been a reluctant observer of our family's inner workings, began to notice a change in me. At first, his curiosity was masked by sarcasm and teasing remarks about my ever-present diary. But soon, beneath his gruff exterior, I sensed a flicker of concern. He asked me, in moments of rare sincerity, if I was truly ready to leave, a question that both pained and freed me. For all his bluster, he was one of the few who understood, even if only dimly, the isolation that had plagued me for so long. Brandon, my fiancé, whose presence on the wedding day had been as fleeting as it was disappointing, offered nothing more than a promise to reschedule the wedding. His empty assurances, coupled with his disinterest, drove home the painful truth. I had never been his priority. With each passing day, I realized that the life I had planned with him was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion, a facade that masked deeper betrayals and unmet expectations. Amidst the preparations, I found solace in the quiet hours of the night, poring over my diary and reflecting on the years of silent suffering. I began to sketch plans for my future in a foreign land, a place where I could start afresh, unburdened by the ghosts of my past. The study abroad application, already stamped with the promise of a new beginning, became my lifeline. I envisioned a life where I could embrace new cultures, learn new languages, and most importantly, discover who I truly was without the weight of my family's indifference. Yet, even as I made these plans, the unexpected return of Eliza, my long-lost sister, loomed like an unresolved chord in a symphony. Her arrival had stirred up old wounds, reopening secrets that I had buried deep within the recesses of my memory. Who was she, really? And why had our parents hidden her existence for so long? As these questions gnawed at me, I couldn't help but wonder if her return was merely a twist of fate or a deliberate intervention in a life that had long been dictated by others. In the silent aftermath of my decision to leave, I found myself wandering the attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with relics of our childhood. Old photographs, faded letters, and trinkets lay scattered in time-worn boxes. Among these relics, I discovered a bundle of letters tied with a frayed ribbon. The handwriting was unmistakably that of our late mother, and as I carefully unfurled the delicate pages, I felt as though I were peering into a hidden history. The letters spoke of secrets long kept from the children, of sacrifices made in the name of survival, and of a truth so painful that it had been locked away for decades. I learned of a time when our family was fractured by tragedy, a time when the burden of expectation and the harshness of reality forced our parents to make choices that no child should ever have to understand. There, in those trembling lines, was the explanation for Eliza's disappearance, a secret kept in the name of protection, a truth too devastating to share. The more I read, the more I realized that my own sense of abandonment was not a personal failing, but a legacy of a family torn apart by secrets and lies. Every 99 scrawled in my diary was a testament not only to my own pain, but to the unresolved sorrow that had haunted us for generations. The knowledge was both a curse and a revelation, a bitter pill that fueled my desire to break free and rewrite the narrative of my life. Armed with this newfound understanding, I resolved that my departure would not be an escape from my past, but a journey toward healing. I would confront the demons that had haunted our family for so long, even if it meant unearthing painful truths that had been buried beneath layers of neglect and silence. The morning of my departure arrived with a quiet resolve that belied the tumultuous emotions swirling within me. I woke before dawn, the first light of day barely seeping through the curtains. In the solitude of my room, I packed my final bag, a small suitcase that contained all my hopes, dreams, and the few belongings that truly mattered. I left a note on my desk, a farewell written in my own careful hand. It wasn't an angry letter or a plea for understanding. It was simply a promise that I would return someday, not as the broken, neglected girl they had always known, but as a woman reborn through hardship and courage. As I stepped out of the house for the last time, I paused at the threshold, my heart pounding with the weight of every unsaid word and every shattered promise. The house, once filled with the clamor of neglect and favoritism, fell silent behind me. I could almost hear the echoes of my childhood, a chorus of whispers that both condemned and comforted me. The journey to the airport was a blur of raindrops and reflective streetlights, each passing moment a reminder that I was leaving behind a life that had never truly been mine. I clutched my suitcase tightly as I boarded the bus, my eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. I didn't look back. On the bus, I opened my diary once more. The entry marked 99 stared back at me, an eternal reminder of the countless times I had been disappointed, let down, and betrayed. With a deep, shuddering breath, I closed the diary. I was done counting my losses. It was time to start counting my victories. The bus ride away from the only home I had ever known was a blur of rain-washed streets, neon reflections, and the distant hum of a city that would soon be just a memory behind me. Every droplet that splattered against the window carried away a fragment of my past, a past marred by neglect, shattered dreams, and a legacy of unfulfilled promises. As the bus pulled away from the station, I closed my diary, the number 99 etched on its pages now a silent oath. I would no longer let others define my worth. Landing in a foreign city, I was immediately struck by the vibrant chaos of the international airport. Here, the hum of different languages, the clatter of suitcases, and the bright murals splashed across walls promised a rebirth I had only dared to imagine in my darkest moments. This was my new beginning, a place where the ghosts of my past could neither follow nor restrain me. I settled into a modest apartment in a bustling district where narrow cobbled streets met modern cafes and art galleries. The energy of this neighborhood was intoxicating. Every corner exuded possibility, every face held a story waiting to be discovered. I began exploring the city, notebook in hand, determined to document every detail of my journey. The scent of fresh pastries from corner bakeries, the lively chatter in local markets, and the unexpected kindness of strangers made me feel as if I were finally breathing freely after years of suffocating confinement. One crisp morning, as I sat in a sunlit park sketching the silhouettes of ancient trees against a pastel sky, I was approached by a young woman with kind, inquisitive eyes. She introduced herself as Marisol, a local art curator with a passion for uncovering hidden stories in the city's forgotten alleys. Over coffee at a nearby bistro, Marisol listened intently as I recounted the tumult of my past, my ruined wedding, the abandonment by those who were meant to love me, and the mysterious return of two sisters whose lives had been tangled in secrets. In her warm, empathetic manner, she urged me to consider that every ending carried within it the seeds of an unexpected beginning. Marisol's words resonated deeply with me, and I began to see my journey not as an escape, but as an exploration, a quest to rediscover myself through art, culture, and the raw beauty of human connection. Together, we explored art exhibits, wandered through old neighborhoods, and even attended underground poetry readings where voices of hope and despair intertwined in powerful harmonies. Each experience, each conversation, was a gentle reminder that even amidst loss and betrayal, life was brimming with potential. As the days turned into weeks, the city revealed itself layer by intricate layer. I enrolled in a local university's cultural studies program, an opportunity that promised not only academic growth but also a chance to connect with people from all walks of life. In the crowded lecture halls and quiet study sessions, I met individuals who, like me, were carrying the weight of their own histories. There was Raphael, an introspective poet whose verses were tinged with melancholy yet sparkled with the brilliance of hope. Livia, a passionate historian determined to preserve the forgotten narratives of the past. And Malik, a soft-spoken musician whose gentle melodies seemed to soothe even the most wounded soul. Over time, our group became an unexpected family of sorts, a tapestry of diverse backgrounds united by the desire to heal and create. We spent long evenings discussing literature, music, and the intricacies of life in a language that transcended borders. In these moments, I began to understand that the wounds of my past were not signs of weakness, but badges of survival. Each scar, each tear, had led me to this new world, a place where I could embrace vulnerability without fear of judgment. One particular night stands out vividly in my memory. After a long day of lectures and creative workshops, we gathered on a rooftop overlooking the sprawling cityscape. Under a tapestry of stars, Raphael recited a poem that spoke of transformation, of finding beauty in brokenness. His words, soft yet resonant, stirred something deep within me, a mix of sorrow, hope, and the undeniable urge to reclaim every lost moment. It was in that intimate circle of newfound friends that I felt, for the first time in years, that I belonged somewhere. Yet, as I immersed myself in this vibrant tapestry of life, echoes of my old world continued to surface. Late at night, in quiet moments alone, I would pull out my diary and reread the entries, the record of 99 disappointments that had long symbolized my isolation. Each page was a reminder of what I had endured, yet also of the resilience that had carried me this far. I began to wonder, was it possible that my family's neglect and the betrayals of my past had been orchestrating something larger? A destiny that, despite its painful twists, was steering me towards something remarkable? The turning point came unexpectedly during a university seminar on family narratives and cultural memory. The professor, an enigmatic scholar named Dr. Leclerc, delved into the idea that the stories we inherit, our family histories, our cultural legacies, often conceal truths that, when unearthed, can liberate us from the cycles of pain. His words stirred a restless curiosity in me, compelling me to revisit the attic of my childhood home in my mind and question the secrets that had long been buried there. Late one rainy evening, I found myself wandering the digital archives of old family photographs and letters I had managed to salvage during my hurried departure. Among them, a faded envelope addressed to my younger self caught my attention. The handwriting was unmistakably that of my late mother, and inside were fragments of a confession, a cryptic explanation of why my long-forgotten sister Eliza had been hidden away, and why Nina's return had been orchestrated as a dramatic disruption in our family's fragile balance. The letters hinted at a deep, unresolved trauma. Our parents had once been forced to make an impossible choice during a time of severe hardship. In order to protect one child from the destructive forces that threatened to tear our family apart, they had concealed her existence, hoping that silence would be her shield. But secrets, as I was beginning to understand, have a way of resurfacing when the heart is ready to confront them. The more I read, the more I realized that my own feelings of abandonment were intertwined with a legacy of sorrow and sacrifice. The number 99 in my diary was not just a tally of my own disappointments. It was a symbol of a family burdened by loss, where love had been rationed out unevenly, and some had been left to suffer in silence. This revelation ignited a burning determination within me. I would not let the mistakes of the past dictate my future. Instead, I would forge a path that honored every forgotten truth and every silenced cry. Driven by this newfound resolve, I decided to track down any remaining traces of Eliza's story. With the help of my new friends and a few determined inquiries at local archives, I began to piece together the fragmented history of my family. Every conversation, every faded document revealed a deeper, more intricate web of secrets than I had ever imagined. It became clear that my departure was not merely an escape. It was the beginning of an arduous journey to understand the forces that had shaped me, and perhaps to finally break the cycle of neglect that had haunted my family for generations. It was during one of those long, restless nights, when the city was hushed under a velvet blanket of darkness, that I received an unexpected message. The email was from an unknown sender with a subject line that read, "We need to talk." My heart pounded as I hesitated, wondering if it could be another remnant of my past, a ghost come to haunt me. With trembling fingers, I opened it. The message was brief and cryptic. It mentioned a family name I had rarely heard, a name that, as I now recalled from the attic letters, was linked to a chapter of our history long sealed away. The sender claimed to have information about Eliza, the sister we had once lost to the shadows of secrecy, and suggested a meeting in a quiet cafe near the city's old quarter. Curiosity and trepidation warred within me. Could this be the key to unlocking the mysteries that had defined my childhood? I knew that to ignore it would be to close the door on an opportunity for truth, and perhaps redemption. I agreed to the meeting, and a few days later, in the soft glow of dusk, I found myself seated at a small table in a time-worn cafe, the air fragrant with the aroma of freshly ground coffee and aged paper. The person who arrived was an elderly woman with kind, weathered eyes and a quiet dignity. She introduced herself as Madame Lucienne, a distant relative who had long guarded the family's hidden history. With gentle patience, she began to recount the story of a family divided by hardship, of sacrifices made in the name of survival, and of a secret that had been locked away for decades. A secret that explained why Eliza had been hidden, and why Nina's sudden return had been a desperate bid to reclaim a lost identity. Madame Lucienne's tale was both heartbreaking and liberating. She spoke of a time when our parents had faced insurmountable odds, a period of economic collapse and personal tragedy, and had been forced to choose which child could be spared the worst of the hardship. Eliza, the frail and sensitive child, had been sent away with the promise of a better future, while Nina, with her bold spirit, was kept close, her life molded by the relentless pursuit of survival. The decision had fractured our family irrevocably, leaving behind a legacy of guilt, regret, and unspoken love. As Madame Lucienne's story unfolded, I felt a mix of sorrow and relief. Here was an explanation, a context that neither absolved nor condemned, but simply revealed the cruel twists of fate that had determined our lives. I realized that my own feelings of abandonment were intertwined with an ancient wound, one that had been inflicted long before I was even born. And as the elderly woman's gentle voice filled the quiet space between us, I knew that the next step in my journey would be to confront these long-buried secrets head-on. Armed with the revelations from Madame Lucienne, I began to see my past with new eyes. My study abroad program, once a means of escape, now took on the quality of pilgrimage, a journey not just to distant lands, but into the depths of my own history. I resolved to explore every fragment of the story that had defined my family, to seek out the truths that had been hidden beneath layers of neglect and sorrow. With Marisol, Raphael, Livia, and Malik at my side, I embarked on a series of explorations that took me to forgotten archives, crumbling estates, and long-lost family homesteads. Each step brought with it a mixture of wonder and melancholy. I discovered faded photographs, handwritten letters, and even a battered journal belonging to my mother. A journal filled with confessions, fears, and desperate hopes for a future that never came to be. In those fragile pages, I found not only the truth of our past, but also a powerful reminder that even in the midst of despair, love had once bloomed, however briefly. In the midst of this search for identity, I encountered moments of unexpected beauty. A chance meeting with an old family friend, a kind, soft-spoken man named Henri, who had once served as a mentor to my father, offered insights into the struggles my parents had faced. Henri recounted tales of a time when our family was united by love and hardship, before the bitter fissures of fate had driven us apart. His gentle reminiscences, laced with regret and hope, made me realize that the seeds of compassion still lay buried within us, waiting to be nurtured by truth and understanding. Slowly, I began to piece together the mosaic of my family's past, understanding that the betrayal and neglect I had suffered were part of a much larger tapestry. A tapestry woven with threads of love, sacrifice, and the unavoidable cruelty of circumstance. Each discovery was both a balm and a sting, soothing old wounds while reopening new ones. Yet through it all, I found an unexpected sense of clarity. I was not defined solely by the failures of those around me, but by my own ability to confront and overcome them. As the weeks turned into months, my journey of self-discovery and reconciliation with the past began to yield fruit. I was no longer the broken girl with a diary full of 99 disappointments. I was transforming into a woman who understood that every betrayal, every sorrow, was a stepping stone toward a brighter future. I had begun to share my story, first in whispered conversations with close friends, then in small public readings at local cafes, and finally in a blog that chronicled my journey of healing. The blog, which I titled Fragments of a Forgotten Past, slowly began to attract a modest but devoted following. Readers from around the world wrote to me, sharing their own stories of abandonment, love, and rediscovery. In these exchanges, I discovered a common thread, a universal longing to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood despite the cruelty of life's circumstances. Every comment, every message of solidarity strengthened my resolve to face the future with courage and compassion. Then came the day that would mark the final turning point, a day when the past and present collided in a way I had never anticipated. I received an invitation to a family reunion. The invitation was unexpected and, in its delicate wording, carried the weight of an apology. My parents had reached out from across the ocean, their message tinged with regret and a longing to mend what had long been broken. My heart wavered between anger and the desire for closure. Could I possibly face the family that had abandoned me on my wedding day? Could I reconcile with the memories that had haunted me for so long? After long nights spent wrestling with conflicting emotions, I decided to attend the reunion, not as a victim, but as someone determined to reclaim her narrative. The reunion was set in a sprawling estate nestled in a quiet countryside, a stark contrast to the chaos of my previous life. As I arrived, I was greeted by familiar faces etched with time and sorrow. My parents, Zachary and Nancy, stood at the entrance, their eyes brimming with tears and unspoken apologies. Adrian, now older and wearier than I remembered, offered a tentative smile. And there, in a quiet corner of the gathering, I saw Nina, her expression a mix of pride, regret, and something I couldn't quite decipher. The reunion was a symphony of whispered conversations, clinking glasses, and long, tentative embraces. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the wounds of the past could begin to heal. I spoke with Madame Lucienne one last time, her wise eyes urging me to confront the legacy of our family with compassion rather than bitterness. As the evening wore on, I found myself engaged in heartfelt conversations about the past, the reasons behind our family's fragmentation, the sacrifices made in the name of survival, and the love that had always, despite everything, lingered in the background. And then, as midnight approached and the stars emerged in a clear velvet sky, a figure stepped forward, an unexpected guest whose presence sent shockwaves through the reunion. It was Eliza, the sister I had thought lost forever. Dressed in simple, elegant clothes, and with an aura of quiet resilience, she approached with cautious determination. In that moment, time seemed to slow as our eyes met, hers filled with sorrow and longing, mine with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and an inexplicable hope. "Eliza," I whispered, the name laden with years of absence and unanswered questions. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been trying to find a way back, to explain, to make amends for everything that was hidden. I never meant for you to feel abandoned." In that raw, vulnerable exchange, the weight of the past seemed to lift ever so slightly. The reunion that had begun as a potential crucible of resentment transformed into a bittersweet moment of reconciliation, a tentative step toward understanding that sometimes the greatest healing comes from embracing even the most painful truths. As the reunion drew to a close and I stood alone beneath the vast expanse of the starlit sky, I felt a profound sense of liberation. The journey that had begun with a ruined wedding, a diary full of 99 disappointments, and a painful legacy of neglect had led me to this very moment, a moment where I was finally in control of my own narrative. I realized that every choice I had made, from leaving my family behind to exploring the world and uncovering hidden truths, had been a step toward reclaiming my identity. The scars of the past, while never fully disappearing, had become symbols of survival and growth. I no longer measured my worth by the affection I was denied, but by the strength I had forged in the crucible of betrayal. Just as I was about to embrace this newfound freedom, an unexpected twist shattered the fragile peace of the night. A voice called out softly from the darkness, a voice I recognized all too well. I turned, and there, emerging from the shadows, was Brandon, my former fiancé, whose absence on my wedding day had once defined my pain. His eyes, haunted by regret and a desperate longing for redemption, met mine. "I had to see you one last time," he murmured, his tone tinged with remorse. "I was a coward, Sadie. He paused, as if struggling to find the words that might absolve him of the past. "I never meant to hurt you. I was so afraid of losing everything that I let fear dictate my actions." In that charged moment, with the past and present colliding beneath the indifferent gaze of the night sky, I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. All the years of isolation and heartbreak, the countless moments of feeling invisible and betrayed, converged into a single shattering realization. Sometimes, the unexpected ending isn't about the final chapter of pain. It's about the possibility of rewriting your story entirely. I took a deep, steadying breath and looked at him with a clarity born of hard-won insight. "Brandon," I said softly, "you're not the only one who's been hurt. But what I've learned is that the past is not something that defines me. It's something I can transform into a source of strength." I paused, the cool night air carrying my words into the silence. "I'm not here to forgive you, or to cling to what might have been. I'm here to move forward, to embrace every scar as a mark of survival. And tonight, I choose to let go of the past, once and for all." In that unexpected moment of truth, as Brandon's eyes filled with regret and a silent apology, I realized that the ending I had feared was not a tragic finale but an invitation to a new beginning. It was an ending that defied expectations, one where the abandoned daughter, the lost bride, and the neglected sister could all find, in the twilight of reconciliation, the seeds of a future defined not by pain, but by resilience, hope, and the unyielding courage to start again. I walked away from the reunion that night with a quiet determination. I knew that the journey ahead would be filled with both triumphs and setbacks, that the echoes of the past might still whisper in the corridors of my mind. But as I stepped into the cool night, leaving behind the fractured legacy of my family, I also stepped into a future that was mine to shape, a future that promised unexpected twists, unforeseen reunions, and the everlasting possibility of rebirth. And so, beneath a sky that shimmered with the promise of 1,000 unwritten stories, I embraced the unexpected ending, one that, paradoxically, was not the conclusion of my tale, but the prologue to a new chapter. In that final moment, I knew that the love I had long sought from others would never compare to the fierce, unwavering love I could cultivate for myself. The reunion had ended in a cascade of bittersweet goodbyes, and for days afterward I wandered between memories and a newfound determination to write a different ending for myself. The chilly nights in my new city became a canvas for introspection, and every raindrop on the window reminded me that even in the darkest storms, light could be found, if only we dared to search. I had returned to my modest apartment after the reunion, my mind still echoing with whispered apologies and tentative embraces. The face of Eliza, the lost sister I had thought to be forever estranged, hovered in my thoughts. Though our meeting had borne the weight of decades of silence and pain, it had also opened the possibility of reconciliation, of understanding the family secrets that had governed our lives for so long. One evening, as I sat at my small writing desk with the soft glow of a lamp illuminating pages of handwritten notes, my thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. I opened it to find an elegantly embossed envelope resting on the welcome mat. There was no return address, only my name, written in a delicate, unfamiliar script. Inside the envelope lay a single document, a birth certificate and a letter bearing a seal that I had never seen before. My hands trembled as I unfolded the crisp paper, and my eyes scanned the text with a mixture of disbelief and mounting anticipation. The letter, written in careful formal language, revealed a truth that shattered everything I thought I knew. I was not, in fact, the biological daughter of Zachary and Nancy Hoffman. Instead, I had been adopted shortly after birth by a family whose means and motives had been obscured by necessity, and by secrets. According to the document, my birth parents had once belonged to an exclusive society dedicated to healing the broken and forgotten. They were influential figures who believed that pain, when properly understood and embraced, could forge a strength unlike any other. My adoption, the letter explained, had been part of a deliberate plan. A test of resilience meant to awaken in me the inner fire necessary to lead a destiny far beyond the ordinary. As I reread those lines, the familiar tally of 99 that had marked every disappointment in my diary took on a new meaning. It was no longer a mere record of neglect. It was a cryptic code, a roadmap, perhaps, left behind by those who had known that every heartbreak would serve a higher purpose. Every time I had felt abandoned, every moment of sorrow and isolation had been a piece of a grand design intended to prepare me for a legacy that had been hidden in plain sight. I sank onto the edge of my bed, my mind racing. The revelation was as overwhelming as it was unexpected. All my life, I had been defined by the pain inflicted by my adoptive family's neglect and the casual cruelty of those closest to me. Now, I realized, the very wounds that had left me feeling unloved were, in truth, the scars of a deliberate trial, a test meant to awaken something extraordinary inside me. In the days that followed, my world shifted in ways I could hardly articulate. I spent hours poring over old documents, family photographs, and the brittle pages of my mother's journal that I had found tucked away in the attic. The journal, filled with her heartfelt confessions and dreams of a better future, hinted at a secret society, a network of compassionate souls dedicated to mending broken hearts and guiding lost children toward destinies of greatness. It was in those fragile lines that I found clues suggesting that the 99 in my diary was more than a symbol of neglect. It was a deliberate sequence designed to help me unlock hidden parts of my identity. As I delved deeper into this forgotten history, I began to receive unexpected support from the very friends who had accompanied me on my journey of healing abroad. Marisol, Raphael, Livia, and Malik, each with their unique gifts, rallied around me. Together, we scoured local archives, met with obscure scholars, and pieced together the mosaic of a past that had been shrouded in mystery. One crisp morning, while I was sipping coffee at a small cafe near the university, Marisol approached with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Sadie," she said softly, "I found something in the city archives that might help explain what you're experiencing. There's mention of a secret philanthropic society, one that operated in the shadows during times of hardship. They were known as the Keepers of the Heart, and according to the records, one of their founding principles was that every lost soul was a seed of future greatness." Her words sent a shiver of recognition down my spine. The idea resonated with everything I had begun to understand, that my painful journey had not been a series of random misfortunes, but a path designed to test my spirit, to prepare me for something extraordinary. With each piece of evidence, the puzzle of my identity was coming into focus. I learned that my biological parents had been visionaries, individuals whose love and sacrifice had been so profound that they had chosen to hide their legacy for my protection. waiting for the day when I would be ready to embrace it. In the midst of this revelation, Eliza reached out once more. Our earlier reunion had been tentative, but now there was a shared understanding between us, a silent acknowledgement that we were both pieces of a larger puzzle. In long, hushed conversations over tea, she recounted fragments of memories from our early childhood, a time when our mother's gentle voice had filled the house with hope and promise before fate had splintered our family. Eliza, too, had always felt different, haunted by an intuition that there was more to our origins than met the eye. Together, we began to piece together the hidden legacy of our biological family. Every scrap of information, every faded photograph, every whispered memory pointed to a destiny that was as daunting as it was inspiring. Our adoptive family, the Hoffmans, had cared for us in their own flawed, often painful ways, but the truth was that we were meant for something far greater. The secret society, the Keepers of the Heart, had long since disbanded in public memory, but its legacy lived on in the form of cryptic clues and symbols, one of which was the recurring number 99. I started to see that every time I had recorded 99 in my diary, it was as if I was subconsciously aligning myself with a hidden code, a call to awaken, to become the person I was always meant to be. What had once been a tally of disappointments was now a sacred record of trials endured and lessons learned. Armed with this profound new understanding, I began to reshape my life with a sense of purpose I had never known before. My study abroad program, once an escape from the painful memories of my adoptive family, transformed into a pilgrimage, a journey to discover and reclaim my true heritage. I reached out to Madame Lucienne one last time, seeking guidance as I navigated this labyrinth of identity. With her gentle wisdom, she urged me to trust in the journey and to use my story, every heartbreak, every moment of solitude, as the fuel to ignite a new beginning. It was during this period of intense transformation that Brandon reappeared unexpectedly. One rainy afternoon, as I walked along a cobblestone street lined with ancient trees and forgotten murals, I found myself face to face with him once again. His eyes, filled with remorse and longing, met mine. "Sadie," he began hesitantly, "I've been trying to find you, to explain, to say that I never truly understood what I lost." I listened as he spoke, but his words, though earnest, could not erase the truth that had been revealed to me. I had discovered that the very pain I had endured was not a punishment, but a preparation. I was no longer the abandoned bride or the forgotten daughter. I was the heir to a legacy of compassion, resilience, and hidden greatness. "Brandon," I said gently, "what you lost was never mine to give. My story has just taken a turn I never imagined. I have discovered that every moment of isolation, every tear I shed, was a step toward this destiny. I was chosen to transform my pain into strength, into something that can change lives." His eyes welled with unshed tears, and for a long moment, the rain seemed to hold its breath. Then he nodded slowly, as if accepting a truth that had been written in the very fabric of our shared past. In the months that followed, I embraced my new identity with a fervor that surprised even myself. I began to write in a different tone, a blend of memoir and manifesto, chronicling not just the 99 disappointments, but the journey toward unlocking the secret code of my soul. My blog, Fragments of a Forgotten Past, evolved into a movement of its own. Readers from across the globe reached out, sharing their own stories of abandonment and eventual triumph. They told me that my revelations had given them hope, that my courage in confronting the hidden legacy of pain had sparked something deep within them. Eliza and I began to work together, tracing every lead related to the Keepers of the Heart. Our efforts eventually led us to an old estate on the outskirts of the city, a place that, according to obscure records, had once been a sanctuary for those who sought to heal their broken spirits. In the estate's dusty halls and overgrown gardens, we uncovered artifacts, diaries, and even an ancient ledger inscribed with the number 99. It was as if the very walls of that forgotten place whispered the secrets of our past. One evening, as twilight draped the estate in shadows and the scent of old paper and wildflowers filled the air, I made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in a locked drawer was a final letter addressed to me, a letter from my biological mother. With careful hands, I unfolded the delicate parchment and read her words, written with a tenderness and hope that transcended time. In the letter, she explained that the hardships our adoptive family had imposed were not born of malice, but of a desperate attempt to prepare me for the extraordinary destiny that awaited. Every act of neglect, every instance when I was left to count the 99 disappointments, was part of a larger plan. A plan to forge within me the strength to one day lead a new era of healing for those who had been forgotten and forsaken. She wrote of her dreams, of a future where I would rise above the pain and guide others toward a life of compassion, understanding, and purpose. As I finished reading, tears streamed down my face, not of sorrow, but of a deep, cathartic release. I understood at last that my entire life, with all its twists and heartaches, had been preparing me for this moment. The pain was no longer a burden, but a mantle of honor, a testament to the trials that had refined me like gold in the crucible of hardship. Standing at the threshold of the estate as dawn broke over the horizon, I felt an overwhelming sense of possibility. The once abandoned daughter, the ruined bride, and the forgotten sister had all merged into a single resilient being, one who now held the key to a legacy of healing and hope. My journey had led me far beyond the confines of a broken family and a painful past. I was now the guardian of a secret inheritance, a legacy of love and strength that was meant to change lives. In an unforeseen twist of fate, I decided to transform the estate into a sanctuary for those who, like me, had been scarred by abandonment and neglect. With the help of my loyal friends and the many supporters who had found solace in my story, I opened its doors as a center for healing, a place where forgotten souls could find refuge, and where every 99 was reinterpreted not as a mark of failure, but as a symbol of survival and rebirth. As I looked back on the winding path that had brought me here, I could scarcely recognize the frightened girl who had once sat alone with a diary full of disappointments. I was now a woman who had uncovered the hidden truth of her existence and embraced it with an unyielding spirit. The secret of my past, once a source of despair, had become the cornerstone of a future defined by purpose and compassion. And so, beneath a sky ablaze with the promise of 1,000 new beginnings, I stepped forward into a destiny that was entirely my own. The unexpected revelations of my birth, the hidden legacy of the keepers of the heart, and the long-forgotten love of a mother who had sacrificed everything to protect me, had rewritten the narrative of my life. In the end, the abandonment and neglect that once left me broken had transformed into the very force that propelled me toward greatness. I realized that every twist, every setback, every unexpected reunion had been a necessary part of this remarkable journey. I was no longer defined by the failures of those who had once rejected me. Instead, I had forged a new path, one that celebrated resilience, embraced vulnerability, and honored the profound truth that even the darkest moments can lead to the most luminous of futures. In that final, breathtaking moment of clarity, I understood that the unexpected ending was not the conclusion of my tale, but merely the prologue to a new chapter. A chapter that promised hope, transformation, and the unyielding power of the human spirit.